Good morning, everybody. Come on, we know how this works by now. Good morning, people. Thank you. Okay, I've got the slot between you and your coffee this morning, so I'll try and keep it brief, entertaining, enlightening, and hopefully relevant. So before I start, the title here is slightly different to that in your program, because when I first came up with the title, I wanted to talk about, well, what can be done on a mobile device isn't just surveys. And as I kind of got into it, I then figured, well, what I really should do is do some research, do an experiment. And that experiment led me to a new title, which is, it should not just be about survey research. There are so many other things that we can do with these devices that we should think about. So I've got two talking points, really, two themes of this presentation, and they're going to run concurrently throughout the presentation. So first theme is psychology. I want to talk about the psychology of respondents, psychology of humans, frankly. And I'm going to do a few little experiments on you guys too, just so that you're aware. And then I'm going to talk about mobile phone technology. I love the intro, by the way, of the Nokia theme tune. You had no idea this image was in here. My first phone, the 3210, I can still remember going *2 to unlock and type a text, right? So those two things are going to intertwine. So talking points. Let's talk about that book in terms of psychology. So hopefully most of you guys know what I'm going to click next. Who, hands up, we're all researchers, most of us are researchers. Who has read this book? That's a reasonable amount. We're going to go with 50, 60% of people. That's good. You're going to save me a bit of a job in terms of explaining what this book is all about. It took me about 10 or 11 hours to read, and I've got 15 minutes, so that's not going to happen. But essentially, this book is about System 1 versus System 2. So even those that haven't read the book kind of have probably been made aware of System 1 versus System 2. System 1 is the subconscious self. It's the thing that makes us tick. It has a data bank of experience, of memories, and most of the time that is what actually runs us. And researchers seem to love System 1 because that's the instinctive. That's taken away this post-rationalization. You don't want to serve a survey a day or 2 days later because people can't remember. So get into that System 1. The problem with that is that System 1 actually makes mistakes, quite a lot. It substitutes tougher questions for easier questions, and it's lazy. It's really lazy. System 1 will actually only prompt System 2 to think about something if it's not actually sure. Okay? So, we also know, those of you that have read the book will know, that multitasking is harder than we think. I'm really sorry, ladies, that also applies to you. I know you think you're amazing at this, but you're not. You're as bad as us men. Why? Because the brain flits from 1 to 2 and back, and it gets distracted and it'll move on to the next thing. I saw a blog a couple of days ago by, I think it was Lightspeed GMI, who said that our average attention span is almost like a goldfish. It's about 8 seconds. So I thought that was quite interesting. And now here comes the first experiment. This morning I ate a cow for breakfast. Whole cow. Chunk, flank, the lot. There we go, that's better. A few people, heads up. Those of you that were looking down at your phones or writing notes were probably using System 1 to listen to me. System 1 is on the lookout for things that it doesn't quite understand. What I was talking about made sense. Okay, got that, no problem. That means System 2 can concentrate on this actually really important email that I'm about to type. When I mention something that's slightly out of the ordinary, I need to look up now, that doesn't sound right. Does that make sense? Because what we do in surveys is that we push people to System 1. They kind of have it in the background, but they don't really sometimes register what you're doing. And it has a massive impact on data. So I wanted to do an experiment. I wanted to do an experiment that is mobile in nature, because it's a mobile conference. And I wanted to do an on-location experiment. I wanted to send people into supermarkets in the UK. And I wanted to understand if I could force them, essentially, to give us bad data. Now, I wanted to test 3 things. I wanted to test survey length or duration. So many times I get asked a question, How long is the survey allowed to be on a mobile device? What's the maximum LOI that you recommend? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you guys have all thought of this too. So is it really survey length that makes a difference here? Let's test it. I wanted to test distraction. And again, the example I just gave of a few people in the room here with their heads down, that's distracting. You're not quite listening to me. Well, what happens in a store? Now, my philosophy or my theory has always been, if I go shopping with my wife and kids, they're a distraction. My kids trying to pick up everything and put it in the basket, usually down the sweet aisle. So I'm probably less interested in taking this survey. Is that true, though? Thirdly, survey design. Now, I don't know how many people have ever Googled or done an image search for survey design. This is what comes up on page 1. Probably a topic for another day. We as an industry can do better than this, guys. This is poor survey design. But I move on. I wanted to test survey design. Okay, so a little bit of methodology, boring slide. I aimed for a 10-minute survey. And what we did is we split the survey into 2 cells. So I had one cell with 4 open ends. They were pretty dull open ends. What do you think to the store? What is your experience? This kind of stuff. I really wanted to push the boundaries. I had another cell with 6 open ends. The additional 2 were substitutes for a photo question. So the photo questions were find something that's out of stock and find a multi-buy in a crisps section. Okay, so what difference does it make if I substitute taking a photo for typing a text or typing an open end, okay? We went for 250 per cell, fieldwork completed last week, so really fresh. And we went crazy on the incentive. We paid a £5 incentive to every single complete because I wanted to take the financial reward out of the equation. Our industry pays way lower than this as standard, by the way, which is quite scary in itself. So the financial reward should, in theory, prompt them to give us really good results. And then I included a load of questions. So we had gender, age, why were they shopping, who are they with, which supermarket do they shop in. We had general shopping habits. We had past 3-month category purchase. We had out of stock search. We had a multi-buy search. Those are the photos or not. And then the last question was, what categories do you typically buy on your shop? And there were 8 codes. So we were looking for 8 things, multiple choice, okay? So, who's still paying attention? There's a few, right? Okay, good. Most people, actually. All right, for those that are not, back in the room, please. Chicken pie. Come on, chicken pie. There we go. That's got you. Excellent. Yeah. System 2, back on me, please. So, that last slide, by the way, who noticed that the title was an experiment on you? Right? So I'm not really one for dull and boring slides like this, but this is the presentation equivalent of a grid question. This is a multiple choice grid question. So I've given you the question at the top. We all know what it is. Here are the codes down the bottom. By the time I got halfway through here, half of you were bored. This is rubbish. When's this slide going to end? Okay. This is what we do to our respondents all the time. So next time you write a grid question, please think chicken pie. Bring people back in the room. I want system 2 thinking here, especially on mobile devices. No more grids. So let's take a look at some results. I'm going to put duration and distraction on the same slide because actually I've got enough to prove that these weren't a problem. So let's go on duration first. The photo cell took on average 8 minutes 16 versus the open-end cell of 7 minutes 16. That surprised me slightly. I thought that the photo would be quite easy, just take a photo. Apparently not. It takes a little longer to open the camera function. There's a little bit longer in terms of uploading the data. So it averaged a minute longer. So you think a minute longer, that's going to be bad, right? Long survey's bad. No, not necessarily. A distraction. So we looked at, okay, single shoppers, were they on their own, or were they with friends, family, children, whatever. Survey length, near as damn it identical. You really couldn't tell the difference across the 2. So distraction doesn't play a part in terms of it taking longer to do the survey. And on that last question, out of those 8 codes, the average was, again, identical, 5.29 versus 5.27. So I remain reasonably convinced, looking at this data, that survey length and distraction are not key drivers. However, design is. So the out-of-stock question was actually the first question of the two. And this is my work as a researcher. So what would I have cleaned out of the data? I would have cleaned 3% of the photos for out-of-stock. Mostly because we asked them to also capture the label of what it was that was out of stock, and it was slightly blurry or they didn't quite get it right. Only 3%. When they had to type it in, 11%, and that's been really generous. I could have killed a lot more, honestly, because they weren't descriptive enough, or quite often they just said, yes, it was an empty shelf, or gee, thanks, that helps. And then on the multi-buy, it's a lot higher because we, on purpose, allowed the geofencing for Boots, Superdrug, and a load of other places that wouldn't necessarily sell a multi-buy crisp option. We did that to see how people would respond. And what we found was that people on the photo were either trying to go and find some crisps or saying, yes, but there's nothing here, but this is what is here. So I had lots of photos. I think it was hair products in Boots was quite a high one because they're near the food and drink kind of meal deal section. So they tried their best, whereas actually on the open ends, they just said nothing, couldn't find, or garbage, honestly. So that I thought was quite interesting. What then was really interesting was one of the open ends, the fourth one, was after those photos. So I wanted to see if we get any variance. And the word count variance is 6%. So we had 6% fewer words on the cell that had then taken their sixth versus their fourth, if that makes sense. And I think had we really pushed it further, we would have had more and more degradation as that would have gone on. People are getting bored, they're getting frustrated, they want to move on. So for me, it was about design. Now, bear in mind, we pushed a bad survey out on purpose. You should never ask 4 open ends, let alone 6. So we wanted to see what happened, and this, I think, is the result. Let me talk about the trap. So in that last question, battery of 8, one of the trapdoors is a really simple one, evaporated water, more commonly known to us as steam, okay? But we thought, well, if we get to about 10 minutes, how many people are going to go to a multiple choice and system 1 is in control? They've given up, that says water, thank you very much. They're just making an assumption, they've substituted the actual code for a code that they might recognize more in that environment, okay? So, this is what we found. The blue bar indicates all categories, and this is a comparison between the photo cell and the open-end only cell. The open-end only cell, they were 4% up in terms of total category, right? So they would buy, I think it was 5.4 versus 5.2 or something like that, items. So there's a slight exaggeration there. Eliminate milk and fruit because those are the two that everybody buys anyway. Okay, well, 6% variance. Just looking at evaporated water, we had 66% variance between cells. Now, that's variance on a low base, I get it. But here's another stat. I looked at our panel metrics last night as I was finalizing this presentation. And from my survey, it's the average is 400% above what our network average is when we ask this as a generic red herring on as a question 1. So a 7-minute survey, an 8-minute survey, because I designed it poorly, I generated a 4 times uplift in bad data. Now, that's nothing to do with the panelists, that's to do with the survey design. And that is particularly poignant when you're talking about mobile devices. Okay. So, and I think Frank was talking about this today, the guy from KLM. Don't ask questions that don't need to be asked. And so, what we don't need to ask is what we already know. So we already know things like, have I had an advert pushed to my phone via an app or via mobile web? Most of it's in-app. So about 80% of mobile advertising is in-app. And you can very easily collect the device ID from that app. You can compare it against other apps. So then you could push a survey out. You could then start to layer that on. So we also know from apps where people are. Not just where they are, but how long they've been there. So I don't need to ask whether somebody's been to Tesco's or Morrison's or Sainsbury's. I know they've been there. I know how long they've been there. I know how often they go there. And I probably know whether they've been pushed an app for Sainsbury's or not. So you start to build a picture of these people before you even get them to take some surveys, okay? We know about them. We know their demographics. We know their age. We know their gender. Why are we asking those questions? We do it every time. I think almost every survey that we fill through our panel has question 1, are you male or female? Question 2, what's your age? We know that. Why are we asking that? It's crazy. So we know all of this stuff, and it's so poignant to mobile because people are in the moment, okay? And then obviously social media plays a big part too. We can start to connect all of these data points together. So we can start to build so much more of a picture about a human, any human, including me, than ever before. Most of it's driven by mobile. So why are we asking these questions? Keep the questions shorter and more simple. So, final slide. I'll rattle through it reasonably quickly. We're not far from coffee, you'll be pleased to know. Just a few ideas for the future, really. So irrespective of methodology, but particularly true of mobile, ask plain and simple questions that cannot be substituted. Evaporated water can be substituted for water if you've got them in the wrong mental state. They will tell you they buy it, okay? Bear in mind people's attention spans, 8 seconds. 8-second attention span, probably less with what we're trying to do with a mobile device. So unless we're absolutely crystal clear about what we're trying to collect, it's going to be bad. Use technology, I think that is fairly obvious. And my final point, I think many clients out there, in many circumstances, are still searching simply for the what. We researchers try and overcomplicate, we try and overthink it. We need to know why about absolutely everything all of the time, when actually it's not always about the why. Sometimes it's just about the what. And I think we almost need to just come back a step, simplify, understand that people are more time constrained on a mobile and build from there. So those are my ideas for the future. It is coffee break now. I'll be remiss if I didn't please my marketing lady and say we're running a competition, because one of the things that I didn't mention is what the overall purchase intent was for evaporated water across both cells. I haven't mentioned that. So if you come by stand 1, have a guess. There are a set of Bose speakers or earphones to be won for the closest guess on how badly I could get our panelists to respond just by writing a really crap survey. Thank you very much.